When you think of American motorcycle companies, you probably think of the big dogs, or should I say, big hogs, like Harley-Davidson and Indian. But then there are also the smaller boutique brands that make bikes for a more, how should I say this, specialized type of customer. Take Janus, for example. They make motorcycles for model train collecting steampunk enthusiasts. Or there's Arch Motorcycles. They make boutique V-twin powered bikes for fans of the John Wick franchise. But if you want to learn about the most infamous, polarizing, and straight up bizarre American motorcycle company, there's only one name that's going to trump all of them, and that's Confederate Motorcycles. Confederate Motorcycles have built some of the strangest, most expensive machines to ever roll on two wheels. They courted celebrities with their grandiose bravado. They went balls deep on some truly radical designs, and they packaged it all within a brand name that carries some let's just say controversial baggage. So let's talk about Confederate Motorcycles, their bizarre bikes, their peculiar brand, and the unique position they currently hold as the most unnecessary addition to the motorcycle landscape. Confederate Motorcycles are actually a pretty recent brand, starting in 1991 in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. It wasn't created by a seasoned motorcycle engineer who was tired of all the strict confinements of mass-produced motorcycles, or even a grizzled bike builder who had been building custom choppers in his garage. Instead, Confederate was founded by a trial lawyer named Matt Chambers. What could possibly go wrong? Also, just feels like the most Louisiana/Florida/Southern US thing ever, right? Like a trial lawyer decides to make a motorcycle brand in the 90s? Come on. Chambers was of the belief that the motorcycle industry had become too safe, too corporate, and too boring. Japanese bikes were dominating the market with proven platforms that conformed to specific categories and classes. Harley-Davidson was leaning on heritage more than innovation. European brands were doing their own thing, pushing boundaries, but that was overseas. We needed bikes that push boundaries here in the good old USA. Chambers wanted to shake things up with a new breed of American motorcycle, something that was even more rebellious than Harley-Davidson. A bike that promoted individuality and mechanical extremity. So he tore down his freeway billboards that read, "Chambers fights for your rights," stopped taking on slip and fall cases, and started up Confederate Motorcycles. There was a specific philosophy in which Chambers claims the name Confederate came from. In his words, the name symbolized defiance and independence. To literally everyone else, it bore memories of slavery and the losing side of the Civil War. Oops. Confederate bikes were raw, industrial, with an almost brutalist design language. They had exposed parts, weird proportions, and an aggressive, macho look about them. Chambers claimed the Confederate motto to be the art of rebellion, saying, "The rebellion we're talking about is cerebral and spiritual inside of you," connecting with the ideas of Albert Camus or E.E. Cummings and Southern principles Chambers is proud of, not their unprincipled application. What is the deal with all these small boutique companies always trying to spin these intellectual yarns to defend their shortcomings? I mean, I don't have to talk about Janus again, do I? If you want to pontificate on the idea of a motorcycle, just start a damn podcast. The cost of entry is a lot lower. Chambers has even been quoted as saying that he is glad the South lost the Civil War. I think we all are, right? If you have to make such clarifications about the name of your company, you should probably have gotten a second opinion from the get-go. Where Confederate really solidified their place in the market was with their design. They weren't necessarily built for performance, comfort, or usability. They were built to have presence, and they really do, to attract attention, to be deliberately separate from anything else on the road. They didn't look or ride like any other motorcycle. They almost looked like props built for a sci-fi movie, like if Mad Max had a trust fund and a machine shop. One of their most notable models included the Hellcat, which was named after the F-6F Hellcat fighter plane. It was powered by a big air-cooled V-twin engine, as any good American motorcycle should be. It was minimalist and yet overbuilt at the same time. It originally cost around $50,000, but would crest nearly $70,000 after future updates. The Wraith is probably the most iconic Confederate motorcycle. It had a carbon fiber backbone frame that doubled as the airbox. It's kind of industrial, skeletal, and alien looking, sort of like an H.R. Geiger painting that was used as the internal design brief while lacking the inclusion of the phallic images. The Wraith also used a V-twin engine that made 125 ponies and 130 foot-pounds of torque. Pretty good figures. It used a single-sided swing arm and a proprietary carbon fiber front end, costing $92,000 in 2007. This bike actually won second place at the Sturgis Custom Bike Competition, if you can believe it. In late 2015, they produced the G2 P51 Combat Fighter. I swear Confederate must have been giving KTM a run for their money with how aggro the name of these bikes are. The model's frame was made from a solid billet block of aluminum, creating an aluminum monocoque frame. Ducati, eat your heart out. 61 units of the fighter were made, each selling for just shy of $120,000. Confederate loved to talk about materials and engineering. They used billet aluminum, carbon fiber, titanium, and a lot of other exotic materials. But despite this resource glazing, these bikes weren't really about performance in any way. Sure, they were gigantic V-twins making tons of torque, but handling, comfort, and practicality were not a consideration. They were more rolling sculptures than motorcycles. They were very unlike a company like, let's say, Buell, where Eric Buell was dedicated to finding new ways to innovate performance and handling on a motorcycle through mass centralization, aerodynamics, unsprung weight, and the like. I mean, Buell was an engineer and Chambers was a lawyer. Kind of tells you everything you need to know. Real science-based engineering stuff was the kind of thing that Eric enjoyed doing. Confederate was instead like, let's just make a motorcycle that confuses the eye using every expensive material known to man and then sell them all to Tom Cruise so he can create a new church of Scientology where we're all riding space-faring motorcycles in the sky. Chambers once said that Confederate bikes weren't for transportation, they were for the enlightenment of man through machine. Lord have mercy. This begs the question, is it possible to barf and roll your eyes at the same time? I think I just did. Every Confederate motorcycle was absurdly expensive, and it kind of had to be, right? As I mentioned, they ranged from 50 grand to 150 grand depending. And remember, this was in the early aughts. If that sounds like a lot of money today, it was an even more absurd amount of money back then. I mean, you could buy a house for 150 grand back in 2007. Come on! If you wanted to spend that much money on an American-made toy, you could have bought a Z06 Corvette and had money left over for all the Corvette swag and a crispy pair of jean shorts. So, who actually bought these things? Well, it was mostly celebrities and other ultra-wealthy people with more money than they knew what to do with. Notable Confederate owners were Tom Cruise, Brad Pitt, and David Beckham. Talk about a dream white dude blunt rotation, am I right? So chiseled, so beautiful. This bizarre celebrity endorsement gave Confederate motorcycles the aura of affluence and exclusivity. Owning one wasn't for riding, it was for showing people that you could afford to own one and not ride it. Huh? Come on, that's big brain stuff right there. This strategy actually worked for a while. Confederate became known as the anti-Harley luxury brand, where Harley-Davidson leaned on nostalgia, Confederate leaned on radical design and boutique exclusivity. And you thought Ducati owners were pretentious? This is like a whole other ballgame, folks. Parting is such sweet sorrow, but that's what I must do with this Yamaha R9. October 3rd is the very last day you have to get entered to win this machine, so make sure you click the link down below and become a member, sign up, and get your chances locked and loaded to win this Yamaha R9. This is a sweet bike. It's gonna go to someone I know is gonna love it very much and use it for its highest and best use, which maybe doing dank wheelies with it. October 3rd, make sure you got your chances locked and loaded, don't miss out. Now's the time where we get to the real fun part, the controversy. Confederate motorcycles. Right off the bat, the name just makes me think of Gatling guns and horse-drawn wagons, not ultra-modern, highly designed, brutalist future bikes. But the name also has other connotations. When the company launched in the early 90s, people kind of shrugged it off. I mean, PC culture back then was just kind of kicking off, right? The Civil War had ended more than a century earlier, and the name definitely carried baggage, but it didn't immediately tank the company. People just weren't as sensitive to certain subjects at that time, and we didn't have mass proliferation of media or outrage culture like we do today. Think of all the names we used to jokingly call our friends until Hillary Duff showed up on our TVs in the early 2000s telling us that that was no longer permissible.
Say what? Well, say that something's gay when you mean it's bad. It's insulting.
But as time went on, by the 2010s, the cultural conversation around Confederate symbols started to shift. Statues were being taken down, the Confederate flag was being pulled from state houses, and more people were calling out the use of Confederate imagery as racist and outdated, as they probably should be doing. Confederate motorcycles didn't sound like a cool, rebellious brand anymore. It kind of sounded like a dog whistle. Chambers tried to defend the name, saying it was about rebellion, independence, and fighting the status quo, and not about slavery or racism. But no matter how you spin it, when you plaster Confederate across a $100,000 luxury toy for rich guys, it's not gonna bode well in the court of public opinion. I can see the Facebook clickbait now. Zuckerberg's $100,000 Confederate motorcycle discovered to run on adrenochrome. Buy a Honda to save the children. The name became an optics liability. Celebrities weren't exactly eager to ride them to a movie premiere anymore, and for a brand that lived on hype and image, this was the beginning of the end. In 2017, Confederate Motorcycles announced they were rebranding as Curtiss Motorcycles. The name comes from Glenn Curtiss, an aviation pioneer who dabbled in motorcycle land speed records in the early 1900s. The new nod was a historical allusion far less problematic than the former namesake, but the name itself wasn't enough of a change to bring Curtiss into the modern era. They made a switch that could be seen as even more controversial from the original name. They partnered with Zero and pivoted entirely to electric motorcycles. They went from making huge, mechanically over-the-top bikes with booming V-twin engines to making futuristic bikes with the purr of an electric kitten. A parallel comparison would be if Insect Warfare decided to make a K-pop album. Confederate, now Curtiss, didn't want to just shed the baggage from their name, but the entire past of the company. They wanted to appeal to a different, younger, more affluent customer base. Maybe they wanted to exploit the same tech goobers who reserved a Cybertruck in 2019, but therein lies the problem. Most people just didn't care. The only people spending six figures on a dystopian-coded electric vehicle are lizards in human flesh suits. An incredibly douchey minority. Sure, now in 2025 we know electric bikes have all but flopped, but in 2017 these opportunistic companies didn't realize they were doomed from the start. You know, a boutique luxury electric motorcycle that costs 60 grand is doomed when Livewire sells 30 bikes a year for a fraction of the price. I'm not even kidding, they literally sell like a few dozen bikes a year. Makes Janus look like a top-tier operation. They now advertise one model cleverly called The One that seems more like vaporware, a la Damon motorcycles, than it does a flesh and blood machine. Meanwhile, the original Confederate brand and all of its IP didn't totally die entirely. A new company called Combat Motors took over production of the old designs from Confederate, keeping the old wacky billet aluminum bikes alive for a handful of customers still willing to buy them. So you have Curtiss operating as a vaporware EV hopeful, and the Combat Motors quietly selling the gas-powered Confederate holdovers simultaneously. So what is left of Confederate motorcycles? Pretty much just an interesting story. On one hand, they had some of the boldest and most unique experiments in American motorcycle history, and nobody can debate that. These bikes look insane. Nobody else was making bikes with that level of blind hubris. I mean, I really think something like that was only possible in the late 90s, early 2000s America. I mean, it was crazy. They made motorcycles that people used to say, buddy, if I could afford it, I'd love to have a Confederate Hellcat Kalashnikov mustard gas CP69 fighter in my garage. That'd be a dream come true. But even then, they were always kind of a joke. They were impractical, overpriced luxury bait bikes for celebrities before online clout culture even became what it is today. I mean, think about it. Tom Cruise would just pull up on a Confederate, and that was the kind of genesis of his clout for the bike. I mean, it's crazy. All the while, the name was a ticking time bomb, waiting for a certain genre of political correctness to come out and put it out to pasture. And to be honest, I can't say I disagree. It's kind of a tasteless name. Today, Confederate, Curtis, Combat, whatever the hell it's called, they still exist in some way. Sort of. Though their future looks shaky at best. Pathetic and doomed at worst. I guess I'll leave it up to you guys to come to your own conclusions in the comments down below on whether they were engineering visionaries or just early gen pretentious grifters. So, that's the story of Confederate motorcycles. Kind of a weird one today, right? It's a company that started out with the highfalutin dream of rebellion, but they built bikes priced into the stratosphere and then collapsed under the weight of their own tone-deaf branding. Truth be told, even if they didn't have a stupid name, they probably would have failed anyways. I don't understand how you can sustain a business selling bikes to such a small customer base. It was probably just a money laundering operation or a scheme or something like that. Oh wait, they were founded by a lawyer. Mr. Chambers, that was a joke. I am in no way making claims about the authenticity of your company's finances. We do not make jokes here at Yammy Noob. That's not what we do. It's for fun. Please don't sue me. This is all just content for edutainment for slight educational purposes. Well, boys, what do you think of Confederate motorcycles? Have you ever heard of them before this video? If you happen to own one of these bad boys or have had the chance to ride one, definitely let me know. I need to know what the hands-on experience is like. And for some reason, Tom Cruise is not responding to my emails. Thanks again for watching today's video. I truly do appreciate it. I'll catch you all in the next one.